Okay, everyone. So we're on, we just finished step 5 last week. We're still on page 75. We're going to kind of walk our way into step 6. And then once we're done the step 6 in the big book, basically we're going to read to the end of step 7 in the big book. And then we're going to go into step 6 in the 12 and 12. We will be jumping around a little bit in the 12 and 12. So if you don't have a big book or a 12 and 12 hard copy, then you can Google it. And you can Google AA Big Book or AA 12 and 12 PDF. And then you can find a copy of that on your phone to follow along if you don't have a book. Okay, you guys, here we go. I'll go first. Creator, I thank you for this beautiful day today. I thank you for the sunshine that you're bringing into Calgary and the spring feeling that's in the air. I thank you for the gift of life, and feeling spring always reminds me of the new beginning. I ask, Creator, that you allow me to bring something today and release something today in this meeting. Allow me, Creator, to use my experiences in my life in our step 6 literature today. I might be able to help somebody and allow me to heal a little bit on the way. Creator, I thank you for the opportunity to live a life of recovery. It's the best life I've known. I ask, God, that you watch out for the people on the screen, and you know who's hurting out there, God. I ask that you pray and help the people that need the help today. I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you. Hi.
God, thank you for everyone that's here. Thank you for my children. Thank you for being able to, I don't want to say use you, but use you when I can't do things on my own. Today, gratitude wasn't working very well. And so I prayed for help to get some gratitude, and it was given. And it's amazing what a perspective change can do. And it's amazing how I'm not able to do that on my own sometimes, and I need your help. I want to pray specifically for somebody right now who just reached out, and their son overdosed this morning early and is in hospital. And the family's in a lot of pain for some other reasons. So keep them willing to stay on the path that really does have a solution if they're able to let go of some things that are in the way. And bring the whole family some healing. And I pray also for everyone, all of us that need you in different ways at different times, and that we have each other. You can work through us when we can't get there on our own. When prayer isn't enough, sometimes we need people, and you've done it that way for a reason. So I thank you for all of us getting together tonight and speak through me and put my own shit aside for the next couple of hours for sure. Amen.
Okay. So we finished off on page 75 last week, and we finished step 5. So now we're getting into, what it looks like as soon as you're done your step 5, rolling into the 6 and 7. We're going to read this bottom of 75 all the way to the end of the step 7 prayer.
Yeah. Okay. You go ahead, and then I'll start though.
Okay.
You read.
Okay. Returning home. We find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. What I want to highlight about this paragraph is there's exact directions in here. I always talk about the exact directions in the big book. This paragraph has a lot of. So we return home. We find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Carefully reviewing what we have done, we thank God from the bottom of our hearts that we know him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals that are on page 58. We ask if we have omitted anything. If where we are building an arch which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things that we had admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. When ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Then we have completed step 7. So I'm going to talk about the directions in this first paragraph, and I'm going to kind of take it. I'll at least do this paragraph. So when we're done the 5, okay, with our sponsor, or, you know, the person that we decided to do our 5 with, we go home and we find this really quiet place. Maybe it's a mountain by the river, wherever you feel like, you know, you want to be at peace with Creator. And you return home and you sit quietly for an hour. So when I do a step 5, I make sure I'm really clear with the sponsee that this is an hour. There's only 2 timelines in the big book. One is on page 567. It talks about this program should be able to be accomplished within a few months. The steps should be accomplished within a few months. And then the other timeline is 1 hour right here after step 5. And what do we do with that hour? We carefully review what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our hearts that we know him better. That's the direction right there. Whether you believe that you know God better at that moment or not, doesn't really matter. If you're into following directions like I am, then you go home and you say that, God, I'm thankful that I know you better. And you can say that in your own words too, but do that. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. And that's in How It Works on page 59. Carefully reading the first 5 steps, first 5 proposals. We ask if we have omitted anything. What have I left out? Is there anything? Where we are building an arch which we shall walk a free man at last. So remember back in step 3, where it talks about making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And it talks about God is the Father, we are his children. He is the director, we are his agent. This concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch which we pass through to freedom. That's kind of what they're talking about here. We're building this archway that we're going to pass through to freedom. And these are parts of the bricks that build this archway. And that keystone that goes in the top of the archway, that is actually the decision that you make to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. The thing about that decision is you can intellectually and maybe concessionally in your innermost self make that decision back in step 3, but the decisions made through circumstances day to day in your life. It's not made just because you want that. It's made through the action of doing something different in a circumstance in a moment. But this is part of it, the step 5. And you'll see how the step 5 actually is part of that keystone as we kind of move forward today. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? So those are all question mark questions. Is our work solid so far? And we're sitting there contemplating quietly, kind of meditating on what's here on this page for that hour. You know, I'm reviewing my step 1. I'm really praying and I'm meditating on it. And I'm asking myself, did I do the best job that I could in that step 1? Do I believe that I'm an alcoholic and that I'm going to die an alcoholic death if I don't do something? Am I willing to believe that God can restore me to sanity? What does that look like? Step 3, I make this decision back in step 3 to turn my will and my life over. Am I sincere about that? Or is it just lip service? What am I really about in that step 3 decision? And 4, we can kind of review the 4. Most of us, if we're going to skimp on anything or keep something out, it's going to be on the 4. Is my work solid so far, or am I skimping on that cement? Okay. Are these stones properly in place? Are those first 5 steps properly in place? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And if we have done a good job and we're doing the best that we can, we answer to our satisfaction, then we look to step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Willingness is the principle behind step 6. And when we get into the step 6 tonight, I'm going to really hammer something home. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things that we had admitted are objectionable? I'm going to find the things that are causing my failure in the step 4. Those are the defects of character that I'm running on, that I admit to myself and to God and to the other human being. Those are objectionable. They're not really serving me that well, or my fellow people in this world, my family, my friends, and just people. Can he now take them all, every one? Both those questions have a question mark. And when I take someone through this book, I ask them, are you willing to have these things removed? Every one of them. And they'll say yes, yes to both of those question mark questions. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. So there might be something that you're not really willing to let go yet. You know, maybe it's partly has to do with finance as you went through that step 4 and 5, and you really think money is the ticket and you have a hard time letting that go. Your pursuit for money, or maybe it's the women and relationships, or who knows what it is. But if you don't have the full willingness, you ask God to help us be willing. And that's where the humility comes in. We're asking God, right? It's not God, give me willingness. It's God, can I have your willingness so that I can maybe be willing? We always humble ourselves to God's power, God's will, God's courage. And I would really implore the people on the screen, if you're going to build a relationship with God, don't ask God for the strength to do it. Ask for God's strength. It always keeps us small and keeps us in humility when we're calling on that power of God's. And if I can do that right, I move on to step 7. When ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. It's much different than the step 3 prayer where it says, I now offer myself. This prayer that seems like it's the same as the step 3 prayer is nothing like the step 3 prayer. I'll dissect that when we do step 7, but this prayer is much different than the step 3 prayer. I am now willing that you should have all of me, the good, the bad, and I always say the ugly. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go from here to do your bidding. That's a statement. Grant me your strength, God, as I go from right here to do your bidding today. And the word bidding, when you look it up, it means listening to somebody and doing what they say. And if I'm turning my will and my life over and God is love, then I'm doing love out there. And I'm going from here to do your bidding, God. You tell me to love and be an entity of love. That's what I'm going to go do. And then also when you look at that word, and you'll see some sub definitions, it says to surrender in an overly slavish way. And when you look up overly slavish, it means without original thought or idea. So we're surrendering to this idea of love in everything we do without original thought or idea. And the original thought idea is my fear. I'm always going to kind of have a reservation before I make a decision. And I'll talk about that in step 6 when we read the step 6. But it's without reservation. We are acting in God's will without even thinking about it. Okay. And then it says amen. And amen is like a stamp. It's like an agreement. It's like a contract that I now have with God. And now we don't just kind of think this program in principle and try to do the best we can. This is a deal that we made with God to go from here to fucking do his will and live everything we do with love and compassion, kindness and forgiveness. And through the processes of the book, through the processes of the 4 and the 5 and understanding 6 theory, which you'll understand by the time we're done, understanding that step 7 is full surrender, all of this is practically applied through your step 10 process, which we may or may not touch on just to kind of hammer some shit home today. I'm not sure, but that's all I have till we get into the rest of the literature.
Okay. So I watched a movie a while ago. It's like maybe 25 years old, this movie called Sliding Doors. And the premise of the movie was that this moment in time, the character splits and goes in 2 different directions. And this is like a splitting point in my mind where people's recovery seemed to go in 2 different directions. And for me, I went in and the treatment center I was at did step 5, 6, 7 all at once. And so I don't know really about what I have to say about that, because 6 and 7 is just the paragraphs. But I know for sure that when I went home and I sat for an hour and I went through what Bill was just talking about, and I was like, okay. And then I was like, but I don't feel like I'm on 8. There was just something off. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my story, by the time I got to treatment, I just didn't have any answers and I didn't care anymore. And it was a counselor there that actually convinced me to try the steps. And through her pleading, she had said, you know, like all I did was the steps. I was on the streets for 22 years and I was smoking crack and I was in these crazy relationships and I was living the life, and all I did was the steps. I came into the rooms and I got a sponsor, and that's all I did. I didn't have any education and I didn't have any therapy, and all I did was the steps. And so I went back to my room and I thought, geez, like that goes against a lot of things that I think and that I've heard. And maybe I did something wrong when I thought I did the steps and they didn't work for me. Maybe there was something I was missing. And so I thought I had nothing to lose, and I like little experiments anyways. And I thought I'm going to just try it. I have nothing else to do here while I'm here. And if all she did was the steps and I follow what she said exactly and just what's in the book, and she was amazing because she kept directing me back to the book. And when I had an old messed up idea, she would say smash. And she was just like, and that's all she would say. She wouldn't indoctrinate me with her like counseling stuff or her opinions or she would say smash, and I would know it was an old belief, and then I would go back to the book. And I took this like experiment so seriously because I believed that all she did was whatever was in this book, and I wanted to figure out where I had went wrong when I thought I did AA before. And I went back to my room and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this for real. And so I didn't read any books besides this book. I didn't want to confuse myself with anything. So I read a couple of like hard fiction books, but nothing else, like no help yourself books that were on the bookshelf. I just stayed completely to this book, and that was all. So with that being said, after I did my 6 and 7, I came out of the room and I had done the 7th step prayer, and I was like, okay, like that was exactly what it said in there, but it was only 2 paragraphs, and something felt like there was supposed to be more. And I read what was in the 12 by 12, but it didn't make sense. And I like it did, but it didn't. Like it was like, okay, yeah, that's all good. But I see now that it was a lot of theory and a lot of like, yeah, it is sounds good because it's right. It is telling the truth, but I had no idea how to actually play that out in my life. And I thought like from my church days, I guess that's where it came from, is like you pray. And my grandma would always tell me like pray and give your heart over to Jesus, and then that was it. You go to heaven. And so that's kind of what this felt like, was that I was praying and I was saying these words, but I didn't really have any change. And that was my experience with church, and I never found what I was looking for there. And I see now that it was that way because I didn't take any action after, and I didn't know how. And like Bill was saying, in the small moments is where the change happens, and to turn the wheel over in the small moments But in order to do that, you have to be paying attention, and you have to be bringing other people in on it. And you have to be, doing this thing to the best of your ability in the small moments. And it's easy to get complacent, and it's easy to get busy. And especially in early recovery, when things are just a theory, but like there's no real dependence on God coming out of treatment yet, because you're coming out of treatment. And it's like, I was busy getting things going with my kids and picking up the pieces, and picking up the pieces can be, it's distracting, it's sometimes rewarding, but there's a lot of things going on, and things go a certain way, like usually in a positive way, where you're getting things back and things are moving and shaking. And at some point you come up against a decision, right, where you have to either move into the unknown and choose the discomfort to grow. And it's those moments, and those come up actually quite a bit if you're paying attention. But at the beginning, it's like, it's the glaring things, and it's the obvious things, and it's the things that we don't want to do. And so anyways, when I read this, and when I came out of there, we immediately started on step 8 and like step 9 and whatever. And then we went through 10, and it was a worksheet of some kind, and then 11, 12, and they say you're 12 stepped. And so when I got out of treatment, I realized that I could say I was 12 stepped, and yeah, I did kind of go through the steps, and sure, that's true to a degree, but I couldn't explain step 6. So I remember going to a meeting, and it was that topic, and I realized, like, I must not have step 6, because I don't have a clue on how to talk about it. And that means I don't know it, because when you know something, you're able to talk about it at least a little bit. And I didn't know what to say. And there's not much you can bullshit in here, because it's only a paragraph. So I needed to figure it out. And I went on a mission from there. And so when I referenced that movie with the sliding doors, it's like, I see myself where I could have went out into my recovery and just said I was 12 stepped and carried on. But this actually led me down a totally different path, going back to step 6, acknowledging that I had no clue, and then choosing to go on a mission, because I believed what my counselor had told me, that the answers were in here somewhere, and I needed to figure it out. And so I left the meetings, any meetings that were talking nonsense, like opinions and not out of the book. I had to leave. So I was so confused. And so I went to people who were reading out of the book, and meetings that were like that, until I could figure it out. And when I did, that's when I got so much traction, and I was like, okay, this is recovery. So if there's like one thing that I tell people, it's like this step 6, 7 thing, like it's not 2 paragraphs. It's like literally, it's been my whole recovery. I can say that that's where it's been, is like the pain and the surrender, and then the growth, and then the pain and the surrender, over and over and over again. And yes, all those steps, like they all blend into one working model. But step 6 and 7 is the thing that was missed. And then it just seemed like, what are we changing if we're not working step 6 and 7? And so to really get a handle on what that means, and how does that play out in real day-to-day life, is where I had to go and figure it out. And once I figured it out, my life began to change, and pretty quickly. So this is like, to me, this is where things are at. And it's the part of my program that, like, I see that I was lost without it. And it's why I'm passionate about like doing this book study with Bill. It's what led me to Bill. And in my opinion, from what I like from working with other people in recovery, this is the thing that if you don't understand what this is, you don't understand why you're still restless, irritable, discontent. You don't understand when the spiritual malady is creeping back in, and you don't understand why it's suddenly you're drunk again, because you were out at defense you were without defense, and boom, you're drunk. And this is where you actually learn how to have a relationship with God that will become the defense against that mental blank spot. And without 6 and 7, the way that this book tells us to do it, you don't get to move out of the malady, because you're still sitting in self thinking you're 12 steps. So
That's awesome. So without further ado, let's go to, so anyone who joined us late, we're in step 6 and 7 in the big book, and we are now switching to step 6 in the 12 and 12. If you have a paper copy, good. And if not, you might want to Google step 6, 12 and 12 AA and hit, or also put in their PDF. So Step 3 gets all the accolades, okay, in the program. It's kind of like step 3. Everyone wants to do step 3. You want to know how to do step 3? You understand what the fuck step 6 is about. Step 6 is the step that changed my life, very similar to what Janine is talking about. And I became super passionate about step 6 because I knew that this was the step that changed my life. It's actually practically applied in the step 10, but I didn't know that at the time. I just understood what step 6 was saying. And then I tried to do this the best that I could. From that, once I learned step 10, I was actually pretty much doing step 10s because I understood the theory of what step 6 is. So step 6 is, you know, in step 3 where it talks about, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away my difficulties. Essentially, those 3 statements there are step 6. This is where God builds with you and does with you as he will. If you're fucking willing, are you going to be the boy or are you going to be the man? That's what the difference is of step 6. Relieve me of the bondage of self. While I'm tied to self, I am in bondage of my own self-concernedness. I need to be relieved of that. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them. The difficulties are my defects of character that hold me in bondage that need to be taken away and rebuilt with new principles. And these difficulties are what caused me all my difficulties. So that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. The word victory means there was a fight or there is a fight. So I need to be victorious over these difficulties that are fucking going to give me a good fight because I've been using them as coping and defense mechanisms my whole life. And all I really get out of them is I get a sense of relief once in a while. But the older I get and the longer I'm sober, the more that these difficulties will turn in their flight and cut me to ribbons because they don't work anymore. And when you're walking a spiritual way of life, you have to stay all in. You can't be half in and half out. Why? You will suffer with anxiety, with depression, with fighting everyone and everything.
I think because you can't be half in because it talks about this where we're willing to get rid of the shit that we see that's causing us pain. But what about the things we hold on to? Well, the things that we hold on to with our own self-will, it's going to bleed in. And it's gonna pollute the water that should be your recovery. You can't just do some of the things and then not all of the things, because those small insidious things that I was mentioning, like the small moments where, you know, like you have to sacrifice what you would have done for the belief that this is gonna be best for you as you move forward. And a lot of that is the unknown, right? Like to forego the relationship or forego the angry rebuttal with your ex, you know, and to believe that if you don't take a job that's going to sell your soul out, that things are going to be provided for you, and all these things that we don't even stop to think about a lot of times. Like it was just that was never a thought for me to not say what I needed to say in an argument, or to, like, I thought that I would be the coward and the victim and people were going to take advantage of me. But the better result has been to not say all the things I want to say in an argument. And I had to believe that it was going to work, you know? And so you can't just do the big things that are causing you pain. You have to do the things that you don't know the outcome. And it seems like it's the wrong move and it's counterintuitive to how I've lived my whole life, but I do it and I kind of take that chance into the unknown. And then I see that it's the better way. And then my step 6 becomes the step 7, where I'm just surrendering to God's will and I'm seeking to do God's will. And that's just my true desire, because I've seen now, as I've tested step 6, where now I was motivated by the pain, but now in step 7, I'm motivated by the actual desire to seek and do God's will, because the results are better and peaceful and I have serenity, and it was the easier, softer way all along.
Okay. And on that note, step 6 is about learning humility. The whole program is based in humility. Okay. It's the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. there's 3 levels of humility that I've kind of talked about. And first level and the lowest level is humiliation. The next level is humbling through pain, humbled through pain. And the third level, Janine just alluded to, is a desire to seek and do God's will. And there's a bunch of levels in between those levels, but those are the 3 main ones. And step 6 primarily is about humiliation and humbled through pain. Like I said before, it's about learning God's will. How do we learn God's will? Well, when I'm fighting these defects to be victorious over them, sometimes I have to be humiliated through my actions or through the admission of a part of myself that I don't like. And the pain that I suffer through the learning of step 6 isn't the pain of your spirit, it's the pain of the ego. The ego is what suffers, because true love and true spirit of who you are doesn't actually suffer, because love isn't suffering, but the ego suffers. So let's read.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, as you're doing the step 6 stuff and you're stepping into the unknown, a lot of what that looks like, it's not immediate instant gratification results. You can't see it immediately. And so the defects that you're trying to rid yourself of in the moment when you're choosing to do the other thing, you're foregoing something that gives you immediate ease and comfort, immediate relief. We use our defects like we used alcohol to get out of self, to get a sense of ease and comfort, and to get what we think we need, or to hold on to what we have, because we think we need it to be secure. So when we're doing a step 6 defect release into something unknown, we're letting go of what is our security, and it's not an instant payoff. We have to wait for this stuff to play out, and it takes a minute, which is why we need the faith and why we rely on God, because there's a lag time from when we release the defect to when we see the results. And we're used to getting our shit together, like right now with I'm going to use anger and I'm going to get a result. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get a result. I'm going to do this and I'm going to feel better. And this is totally not that. This is like, I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to have faith that it's going to be a minute of being uncomfortable here, and I'm going to be able to rely on God and do something different. And then there's going to be a different result, but it is not instant gratification. And that is that ego dying that he's referring to.
And that minute she's talking about might be days, weeks, months, and years. So it's not going to be 1 minute.
I think we only needed to clarify that for Michael. Everyone else knew what I meant.
You know what I really like is I like your shark fin.
Where?
Look at your shark fin.
The thing on my hair?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
Okay. Step 6, learning about humility. We were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations whatever has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. The, of course, often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be about the largest fact of his life. He will usually offer his proof in a statement like this: sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of my family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got me no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, and then asked a higher power, God as I understood him, to remove my release, the obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. In meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. it is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from the very obstinate, potentially fatal obsession. So in a very incomplete, literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I want to take you guys, like I said, we're going to jump around a little bit here.
I just want to say something before you jump. That first paragraph is like when you hear this is what separates the boys from the men. What it is that all of them without reservation. So all those little ones, all the things that we are justifying that are okay or that we're going to work out. Or for me, sometimes I was like, well, yeah, I know this probably isn't the best thing for me, but I'm going to do it anyways. Those things. So all of those things on all of their faults, and not just one time, but repeatedly.
We'll get to that.
And so that's the difference between the boys who are just doing it for the things that are causing them pain, the glaring things. It's like all the things.
Okay, over to page 50 in the 12 and 12 for a quick sec. It's step 4 piece, and it's the first full paragraph close to the top of the page. By now, the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusions: that his character defects of what we're talking about in the step 6, representing instincts gone astray. The instincts we will be talking about shortly, because we're going to flip from the 6 into the 4 where we talk about the instincts. Okay. So I'm going to restart this. By now, the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusions: that his character defects, representing the instincts gone astray, have been the primary cause of his destructive drinking and failure at life. Then, unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. That all the faulty foundation of his life will have to be torn out and built upon a new bedrock. So what that is saying is it's talking about these character defects that we act out in, that you see in your 4th column. And they're representative of the instincts that are deep down in you that are gone astray. So the defects are the result, but the instincts way down deep are what actually drive them. Okay. And these are the primary cause of our destructive drinking and failure at life. The reality is that when we act in these defects, we cause the failure in our life, and we need the relief, so we pick up the drink. Okay. Unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. So if I don't work on these defects, it tells me I won't stay sober and I won't have peace of mind. There's a lot of people in the program that are abstinent from their substances, but they don't have peace of mind. They're still, in many respects, fucking batshit nuts. Their brain doesn't stop, right? And you can ask them and put them on a lie detector, and they're going to say, I'm trying to do God's will here. But you've heard me say many times in the study, it's not a matter of living your life with the best of intention. You can live with the best of intention all you want, but that best of intention hides the motive. The motive underneath of selfishness, self-centered fear, dishonesty, self-seeking, self-pity, those things are what matter. Those have to be identified. Like Janine said earlier, if you're not aware and you can't see these things, then you're just going to keep living with the best of intention. But underneath, you're making decisions based on self everywhere. So you're still fighting everyone or everything. And the thing about these defects is they're actually deeper than what we're talking about here. It goes deeper. Okay. Unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. That all the faulty foundation of his life will have to be torn out, built upon a new bedrock. The faulty foundation of our lives is built on self. Okay. When you look out in the world and you were in school and your parents taught you what you needed to do, it was about you. If you just get a good job, if you just do this, and if you just do that, you go to school and you get the best marks, and you. The whole society we live in is based in you. So of course the foundation of our lives is based in self. That's the faulty foundation. We need to rip that down and build upon a new bedrock. Where does that word bedrock come from in our literature? Way back in step 2 in the big book. Talked about, do I believe in God, or am I even willing to believe in God? Upon that simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure could be built. The cornerstone is the corner of a piece that goes into the foundation, and it squares up the foundation. And upon that simple cornerstone that's placed in the bedrock, you can build this wonderfully effective spiritual structure if you learn how to turn it over. And step 6 is basically the theory of turning it over. So, anything before I keep going? Okay, back to what we just read. Any person capable of enough honesty and willingness to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without reservation. You should underline that. If you're underlining or highlighting, this is any person capable of enough willingness. But before the willingness, you have to have the awareness. The awareness is, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? You got to be in tune with what you're thinking and what you're feeling at all times. That has to take a top priority rating. And if you're aware and you're identifying your feelings and emotions and you're off, or you're super excited, or you're super depressed, or you're moderately depressed or moderately excited, it doesn't really matter what it is, okay? You got to be aware. That has to take a top priority rating. Without awareness, none of the rest of this shit even fucking happens. As soon as you're aware, then the willingness and honesty have to take a top priority rating, especially the willingness. And then it says to try repeatedly, over and over and over and over, step 6, on all your faults, without reservation, whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually. So this means you do this even in thought. It doesn't even have to be your action. If your thoughts are judgmental, you're living in self, and it's fear at the basis of it. If you're living in greed, if you're living in want or desire or whatever, most of our thoughts are like that, which is why it's really important to be constantly turning it over, because most of our thoughts are about ourselves. And am I willing to try repeatedly, over and over and over and over? And that's what separates the boys from the men. Am I willing to do this no matter fucking what? Repeatedly on all my faults without reservation. The thing about the without reservation is there's always a fucking reservation. And what I love about without any reservations, whatever, is it's in italics, which is why it's in italics, is because when you get the surrender of step 7 type humility, where you're doing things in love no matter what, it's without reservation. You don't even think. When we go to do something nice, or we're going to step out of our comfort zone and kind of be seen for doing something, we always have a reservation. It's like, oh shit, what am I going to lose, or what am I not going to get? And we always think about before we act, because we don't want to look a certain way. But when you get to the surrender with God, it doesn't matter how you look, you act in love no matter what. No matter if you look like a fucking idiot or not, you act in love. Doesn't matter how you look anymore.
And part of that switch over is because, like for me, I look at all these defects and the actions that I'm taking. At some point with doing it myself in step 6, I get convinced, just like I was, when they were talking about the actor. Well, now it's playing itself out. The actor didn't make a ton of sense to me back in step 3, but going through the 6, 7, 10 process of this, it's like I become convinced that any aspect of self, is never going to be a success. And I just be convinced about that. And so without reservation, I do it the other way. Even in the moment when it doesn't look like it's going to turn out, I am convinced that the other way is not success. And even if I can't see it now, I can always connect the dots looking back.
And after what I just read, has indeed come a long way spiritually. So if you can do this without reservation on all your faults repeatedly, it tells me right here that you're going to grow closer to God. you come a long way spiritually. And is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely, honestly, with a deep level concession that I'm honestly trying to grow in the image and likeness of my Creator.
That's the motive and the intention are in alignment. You know, you don't got a weird intention and a weird motive. Like you're just doing it with love, with no self underneath.
And you're all in.
Mhm.
You're all in. And of course, the often disputed question whether God can and will under certain conditions is can he remove these defects, and will he under certain conditions remove these defects of character, will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. Well, I'll dispute that. It's not almost any AA member. It's very few AA members. Am I going to be willing to really have this proven to me? To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be about the largest fact in his life. Because honestly, most AA members or 12-step members, they're not doing this at the capacity that they could. Partly because they don't want to and they're not willing to give it up. And partly because everyone else is fucking doing it. So why should I fucking do it like that? And a large part is because they don't even know any better, because the program is so watered down with bullshit that you don't actually even know what this is talking about, right? And when you ask me, to him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It'll be the largest fact of his life. I started this step 6 session saying that step 6 was the greatest fact in my life. It was the whole catalyst for my change of my own character. And like, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I will a little bit, right? You know, I watched a Will Smith thing on TikTok or a Snoop Dogg thing last night on TikTok, and Snoop Dogg's up at the microphone. He's like, I'd like to thank myself for fucking never giving up. I'd like to thank myself for always being there for me. I would thank, you know, he was going on thanking himself. And I kind of related. I'm like, fuck, good on you, Snoop Dogg. And like the thing for me in the step 6 is I did it, man. And I tried it fucking really hard all the time. Even in a meeting when I was resentful, I fucking prayed for people. When I would get a thought that was fucking out of alignment, seeing a chick on the side of the road, I would try to ask God for help. And like, I was always aware of my thoughts and my actions, and I was always trying to fucking change it. Did it work all the time? No. Often when I started the process of step 6, I fucked it up all the time. I missed the fucking opportunity to turn it over, and I acted in the defect first. But that didn't mean that I wasn't willing. I just have a whole lifetime geared to the way that I ran my life that I'm trying to turn over. So it took a lot of willingness for me. And it took a persistent, consistent commitment for me to change. And the thing about the change was, when I'm going down the one path where nobody else is going, I don't even know if there's even a gold nugget down there. And I'm just believing in the literature because no one actually really taught me about this. I just figured, fuck, it's got to be this way. The literature hasn't lied to me yet, and I think there's gold on this path, when everyone else was going down the other path. But I just did it. And it's become the largest fact of my life. And because of that, I'm a different person today. And I really know that it wasn't because of me. It was because I was willing to ask God for help in everything. Like, I see people on Facebook. I'm going to use Facebook for a second. People post all sorts of shit on Facebook. Okay. They're bashing each other. They're fucking talking shit about each other. They're self-righteously angry at each other. They're fucking blaming this and blaming that. And fuck, that's where it has to stop. That's where you got to go. This is not the path. If I keep fucking producing more of that in my life, I get more of that back in my life. And I don't know if any of you are my Facebook friends out there. Maybe some of you are. You'll notice this. I don't fucking hardly comment on anything on either side of any fence. I have a position of neutrality. I'm safe and protected within my own mind. I have no opinion on outside issues. Hence, because of that, I'm not drawn into other people's drama because of their trauma. And I actually understand that these people that are doing this aren't emotionally They're emotionally ill, spiritually sick, and frequently fucking wrong. Just like me. I've been that. And I can still be that if I'm not doing what the step 6 stuff is. So on Facebook, we have to watch for self-pity. We got to watch for self-righteous anger. We got to watch for what we're fucking stating our opinion on. And it's nothing's really right and nothing's really wrong. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I do have some of my own opinions, but I don't have to blast them all over fucking Facebook and cause fucking people to fucking come at me. It's not even worth it. And I don't even actually care. So these are the moments, like these little moments. What am I doing on a text message? Am I sending my girlfriend, hey babes, are you coming over tonight? I haven't seen you in 3 nights. I need you here tonight. Expectation, expectation, expectation. Well, maybe she can. Then I set myself up for resentment. Oh, fuck, I'm always at your house. You don't even want to come to my house. Resentment, fight, resentment, fight. Like, I got to be careful with all of these aspects of my life. And you know what? Because I'm fucking at a lot of peace in my mind because I've worked repeatedly at these defects of character and I don't fucking struggle with a lot of shit in my head. And I used to. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say kind of what you were talking about, where there's 2 types of people that when they're making change, it seems that, and this is beyond recovery, this is just kind of what I've observed in my job, is that there's a person like myself who comes in and I've had a good childhood. So that's kind of like, I know what this is like a little bit, to have a stable home and a this and a that. Like I went off the path, but I know how to get back, and I have a level of functioning that I know I can reference in my mind. But then there's another type of person, and probably more common in recovery, is that they're just doing the best they can, and they just don't want to go back to what they had. And so they don't have a reference point. And I think that that's like amazing when people have just come into recovery and they're forging new territory. And so I think that giving the message that, this can bring results that you can't even fathom. And that the idea of just getting sober and carrying on, like, where this is better than it was. And it's like, we're not having domestic violence and we're not having police over and there's no drugs in the house. And it's like, but it gets better than that. Like that's just your breadcrumb sobriety. And that if you keep doing this stuff, it's beyond your wildest expectations. And so, and it says this further in the literature and stuff, and get into a vision for you. And it talks a lot about the type of recovery that we can have if we do this stuff as best to our abilities repeatedly when we can, when we notice it. And, to just stop when things are good, that's a temptation, and it's an error that gets overlooked sometimes. And so when I work with women in the program, I really say, like, okay, things are going good. Where can you level up? Because there's always, don't just stop, don't get complacent, because the good is the enemy of the best.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Trish was asking.
Trish, go ahead.
She was asking, what is self-righteous anger?
Okay. Self-righteous anger is like when you feel you have the right to be angry. Oh, fuck this guy. What a piece of shit. Look what he did to me, right? Or it can be in many different ways, but it's when you feel you have the right to be angry.
So like when I got served with the court stuff when I first moved up here, and I didn't see it coming, and it was suddenly I was in the child custody thing, and I was really upset. I had justified self-pity, justified anger, and it looked like, doesn't he see how hard I've been working? Doesn't anybody notice this is a better move? Why isn't anybody actually telling him that this is the best thing for all of us? And and that was like, I couldn't even see it, because it felt like so realistic, and it was like all those things were true, but that doesn't matter, and it doesn't get me anywhere. And in some ways that was worse for me than the anger that was just unjustified and fancied or made up. So, and it took me down in a different way, and I needed a pillar to snap me out of it because I couldn't see it.
And so she mentioned something good, a pillar. Okay. When we're new in recovery, we don't even know all the ways that self can manifest itself in all these different ways. It's hard to see because we have the good intention. But as you stay sober and you use your pillars, our pillars are there to help point out the selfish self-centeredness of the alcoholic that we can't see, because you can't see self from self. Once you can step out of the way of self and somebody else can help show you, you might not like what they're fucking telling you too. That's where the humiliation and humbled through pain comes, right? Now your pride's hurt because you were for sure in the right, but it's not about you being in the right. It's about us looking for our own mistakes. Where are we at fault? Putting out of our minds entirely the wrongs that other people would have done. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. And the word resolutely means in an admirably purposeful, determined, and unwavering manner. We only look for our own mistakes. So if they were 90% at fault and I was 10% at fault, that 10% is 100% of what I look at. And I don't mind what they fucking do. And I make my amend, or I look at my selfish part and I become aware on my own 10%. That's it.
And in that awareness, like with that example that I just gave, it was like, okay, looking at my part, that's fine. But it was also about, how do I use this program to accept the things I can't change, and what actions do I need to take? Like what do I do now that I have to, take my own. Avoidance was a thing, right? So I had to do some things that were really uncomfortable, and I had to sit and wait for a result for a while. And that was where I really leaned on God, and I got deeper after it was all done, and I came out of it and I was like, whoa, like that was actually really, really profound, in the way that I had nothing else but God. And my sponsor said at the time, you don't know that God is all you need till God is all you got. And that was a situation where that was so, and there, looking at my part was helpful in that it took the anger off of, someone else. But also looking at what steps do I need to take? And when I took those steps, then it was like, now how can I sit and just rely on God? And what do I need to do to sit in this uncertainty? And how do I, do this uncertainty to the best of my ability without reaching outside of myself for comfort that's outside of myself, to a relationship or to gambling or to, whatever, to how can I just be in the uncertainty and use prayer and use meditation. And I used different tools, podcasts, I used crying, I used journaling, I used everything that was so foreign to me to stay in that uncertainty and to just really bring God into it, and not bring other things into it. And the result was like, it was a deepening of whatever relationship I have with Creator. It changed, and it took that pain. And I think that that's why we want the painful experiences. And Bill had told me that at the beginning, was that you want the demolition process, and him telling me that early on was super helpful, going through the pain and the uncertainty, because I was like, hey, bring it on, because this is God smashing the insides of what used to be so that there can be a rebuild. And so I knew that pain was part of the process. And if you know that, and if you're able to warn somebody before they're going through it, like when they're, getting into step 5, and you're talking about what 6 and 7 is going to look like, to be able to say, it's going to look like a lot of pain, but you want the pain. You want the pain, you want to go through the pain, and you want to use God as the best you can through the pain, because that's where he's smashing what used to be so that there can be a rebuild. And in step 7, where it says it doesn't have to take a long time, it doesn't have to take a long time, but a person makes it take a long time if they don't want to sit in the pain, and they're constantly looking for other things, people, places, things to distract them and take them out of their pain. Then the process takes a longer time than it needs to.
Okay, 64, second paragraph. Having been granted a perfect release
Do
from...
you want to take a break?
No. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? Well, that's what I'm looking for. If God can remove the mania from alcohol from my life, Why can't he do the same with every other difficulty or defect? Question mark. Well, I hope he can. This is the riddle of our existence. And the riddle is you can't answer a riddle, right? The full answer, though, of which may be only in the mind of God. God knows. God knows everything. So he knows. Nevertheless, at least part of the answer is apparent to us. So when I go to rooms and I hear a lot of people share on step 6, it says, well, God removes these. I don't have to do anything. That's bullshit. We have to be aware. We got to bring it to the surface, and we got to be willing to let it go. That's why it says that nevertheless, at least part of the answer is apparent to us. I have to do the legwork and the footwork. And what I found about this relinquishment of defective character, as time goes on and God sees that I'm really invested in this without reservation, a lot of times he'll do more work than I have to do. And then at other times, if it's a really sticky defect that I really can heal from, he'll get me to do more work than he's going to do. So there's kind of a balance here working with God in this defective character. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit the most unnatural act. Defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation, they seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct. As they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol, the grace of God can enter and expel their obsession. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. But most of our other difficulties, like these ones we're talking about tonight, don't fall under the same category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, reproduce, to be somebody in society of his fellows. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Indeed, God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man the instincts to help him stay alive. So we're getting into the instincts a little bit here, okay? It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us to fully eliminate our instinctual drives. And when you look up the word drive or driven, it's like, by definition, one of the definitions is an unseen force that compels, okay? So these instincts are drivers. They're way below the surface. So as far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed any human being from all his natural drives. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, isn't it strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose? There is the alcoholic right there. We all have instincts as human beings, but the alcoholic lets these far exceed their intended purpose. Way back a bunch of episodes ago, I talked about the ego, and I talked about how the alcoholic's ego is not just the, it's the, right? That is using our instincts way outside of their intended purpose. When they drive us blindly. So now we're getting into it. These instincts are going to start driving us blindly. We can't see it, but they're in charge, okay? Regardless of what we think and how much we think we're in control of our own lives, we're actually not. Our conscious mind only contributes to about 5% of actually what we do in our day-to-day behaviors. The 95% that comes from the instinct and our subconscious is actually what drives everything. Or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible or due to us. That is the point which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, our sins, our defects or sins. So here's God's will with my instincts, right? We work within the circle of God-given instincts in a balanced way. But because the alcoholic is not emotionally balanced, we often use these defects in all sorts of ways way outside of the circle. The further outside of that circle I use it, the more pain I cause myself and other people typically. And because I have multiple instincts, I can do multiple instincts on rampage at the same time. Okay, I'm going to stop pretty quick here. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, our sins. But if we ask God, God will certainly forgive our derelictions. So God's going to forgive our derelictions, but in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. I got to be willing to work at this as well. And if I have a loving and forgiving God and I mess up, when you're really practicing step 6, you're not making mistakes anymore. You're making decisions in your life that you're willing to grow and learn from. Way back in How It Works, it talks about we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. That's what it's talking about. Out of everything that it seems like it's a mistake, with us working this program, it's not a mistake anymore. It's you're doing your very best at trying to build character and leaning into love and working with your God. So you're going to make decisions that you learn and you grow from. Other people might judge it as a mistake for you. And that's where I kind of grew into my own. I was like, I know I'm fucking doing this to the best of my ability. And you got to temper that with the alcoholic's ability to rationalize and justify his own bullshit. So this has to be like a real version of I am doing my best for real. And then as long as my 3 or 4 pillars are supportive of me, I don't really care what other people say or think anymore, because I know I'm trying and I'm going to claim spiritual progress out of this seemingly mistake, out of this decision that I'm going to learn and grow from. I'm going to take some inventory. I'm going to ask my sponsor to help me out in this area again, because it seems to be getting me here and there. Okay. And that is something we are supposed to be willing to work towards ourselves. He only asks that we try the best we know how to make progress in the building of character. So there's 2 things. I'll finish with this. There's 2 things about step 6 on this piece. If you're trying your hardest and you're turning to God and you're asking what God's will is, and you're sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of your creator, you're not making mistakes anymore. And if you're still out fucking around and you can do better, then you're the boy that talked about at the beginning. Are you the man or the boy? Right? The man is trying to achieve like a God objective, trying to really grow, and the boy is still fucking around, not really willing to give it up, causing people pain, taking from life, and kind of fucking probably being the actor in the rooms. I'm going to play this role in the room, and then out here, I'm going to fuck around.
Or trying to have high level quality recovery in all areas except for one, and it doesn't work like that. It just, you can't have it in all areas except a couple or a few or even just one, because the dishonesty of yourself and, missing the mark of what God's will for your life is, it bleeds into everything, and it weakens you in all areas. I was trying to think of that a time when I was still in Medicine Hat and we were on the phone. I can't remember what the decision I had made or what was going on, but I was really in a panic about, what if this is a mistake? How do I know this is the right thing to do? And I was yammering on about it, and you were like, it's not, if it's a mistake, it's not a mistake. Like if you just do what you think you got to do, pray, do what you intuitively think God is calling you to do. And if it doesn't work out the way that you think it's supposed to work out, you're collecting data, but there isn't a mistake. You're just taking steps away from where you're at. And that's good. Going into the unknown from where you are now is good, and it's what you want to be doing. And I was praying that night after that phone call, and I wish I could remember what the actual thing I was freaking out about was, but my grandma, she's come to me in all kinds of ways since she's passed. Like, things come to me from her in prayer, a lot of Bible verses, and that particular phone call afterwards, when I was praying about it later, I remember all things work together for good for those who love God, and she would always tell me that. And that came to me, and it fit with this, like it fits. If all things work together for good to those who are trying to follow God's will, it doesn't matter if you make a mess of it, because it's about progress and trying to follow God's will, and not about the perfection and the result. And it's not about things coming out just the way that you think that they're supposed to be, because me thinking that I'm going to take this action and go into the unknown, and then I'm going to be able to understand how the outcome is going to be, is silly, because like, again, it's my mind trying to recreate an outcome the way that it does. And I have to just take one step at a time and stay in today, because I don't know how the outcomes are going to, and me thinking about how it might lay itself out actually has taken me off path. Like I remember trying to move up here, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and this, and it looks like planning. This is the thing, is it looks like planning. Looks like, okay, I'm gonna get this place, and then it's gonna be in this area, and then I'm gonna do this, and then it's gonna, and then I've got my mom telling me make a pros and cons list, and and it's me taking my own mind, my own human mind, even to the best of the ability and the sober thinking, and me trying to construct something that the world tells me is responsible to plan ahead and to, think of these things. And yes, you do have to. Logic is good stuff. We like it. But as far as logic goes, God is so much bigger than that. And I found that in my unfolding of my story to get up to Calgary, and just my recovery in general, that when I do too much of that, it's like I get confused and I start making these decisions that, like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to work over here because I'm over here in this area, and maybe that, and it puts limitations, and I can miss lay itself out. So I've learned that the strategy for me is that I do the next thing, literally what's in front of me, and then I just leave the expectations. And that has actually been something that I started out of anxiety, because I just had so much anxiety to bring it back to a moment or to an hour. But then I began to see that this is the way that's easier, because I see that I would have missed this, or I would have done that, or I would have, so to just do the next thing. And then it's an adventure. How things go tomorrow, I can decide tomorrow, but I do the best that I can today. And then I know that whatever's in front of me, that's what should be in front of me, because I'm not making it murky with my own self-will. I'm just really doing the next thing in front of me to the best of my ability. But at the beginning, it was insanely, the angst, the anxiety, I felt like a rat in a cage. Like everything felt like I was on like some sort of like sober acid trip. And like, if I didn't have Bill saying like, hey, this is good, this is coming up, and this is like, and to redirect me, like there was a couple times that, and I didn't know him very well. Like we didn't have a deep friendship yet. And he'd be like, okay, like I was doing something like fucked up, like I was about the interview for the job or whatever, and he calls me at this like profound time, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm 5 minutes away from this interview. And he's like, what? He's like, for the job that you didn't want, that you won't take, that's the same as what you were doing before. I'm like, yeah. He's like, huh. And then I just started crying, and then he said, okay, I'm gonna let you go, and you pray and do what you got to do. So he would redirect me back to the inner resource, and not Bill as a resource. And there was another time, can't remember what I was going on about, like this, what I mean. It was like I would feel like I was so insane, I couldn't tell up from down. But it was some sort of decision. And he said, Kate, he's like, I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna pull over, and we're just gonna sit here, and I just want you to pray. And I was like, what? This is so uncomfortable. I remember I had my son's crib half dismantled, and I was sitting on this pile of crib. And then he's telling me, and I'm like, okay. But I did. And he's like, just write down what comes to you. So he was just parked and waiting, and he held space for me to go back to God. And it was really powerful, and it really set in motion a pattern for me. Instead of going to a person, I would go back to God, and the pillar would send me back to God. And my answers were never in Bill, although he would direct me back to the book and God. And it was a quick resource, an outer resource to take me to the inner resource. But Bill was never the solution for me, because he couldn't be. But Bill knowing this book caused me a lot of shortcuts to happen, and a lot of fuckery in my head didn't have to be so long. And I didn't have to struggle for a long time to figure it out, because I had somebody who knew the book, who could take me back to the book, and could bring some sanity to my mind that was trying so hard to go back to what it knew, which is the way of the world, which made no sense when I'm trying to develop a spiritual connection to a higher power that I'm still trying to figure out. So the way of the world was really
shortchanging me and making the process way more confusing. And so to have somebody who knew how to do this stuff saved me from myself.
And another thing she's saying, without saying it, is things are only seemingly good and seemingly bad. Okay. We always think when we don't get what it is that we want, or something terrible happens, we think that it's bad. It's not necessarily bad. And the good things that you think are good, they're not necessarily good. That's why developing an intuition, a God-centered guidance system that we all have innately in us, and clearing away all the shit that's not God. And that starts with this defective character, so that we can actually listen to that. Because when the foundation of your life is fucking shaking by terrible things happening, or seemingly terrible things, you run to God to find out he's the one shaking the foundation of your fucking life. He's shaking you like, no, go here. No, I'm removing this person out of your life for a reason, because I need you over here. I'm taking this job away from you, and so you can go over here. Go on, EI. Learn some humility. Get some gratitude, young grasshopper. Because I need you to go over here and be a fucking pillar for this group over here. Don't take this job that you know inside you shouldn't take. Listen to that intuition and sharpen it, because nothing's good or bad. And that's why it says to let go of our old ideas. Absolutely. All of our old ideas, so that we can have one idea without reservation, so we can surrender in an overly slavish way. Without original thought or idea, we fucking serve God and his kids, and fucking it won't even matter if you fucking live in a house or not. If you're fully invested in service, God promises in this book that if you perform his work well, you get what you fucking need. And the other promise in this book is never are we to pray for ourselves, except as how our usefulness borders on our helpfulness to other people. Then, and only then, do we expect to receive. It says I can expect to receive, and that would be in great measure. So when people tell me, this is me personally, no, I need to balance my whole life and really work for myself too, and I will help other people. And that's kind of what this program's about. I'm like, no, it ain't. It's about fucking full service to your God and his kids. And you will get what you want. And the things that you think are important based on that theory that I just said of what you might think life is about, that'll all get erased. Because through compassion and love, all that gets erased and it doesn't matter. God will give you the roof. He'll give you the food. He'll give you the things that you need to perform his work well. But to trust what I'm saying, for most people, that's a fucking stretch, man.
That's weird you said that, because I was just thinking it is so important to have people in your life in this program when you're trying to do this, that you believe in what they're saying, because I did believe you. And that example that I was talking about earlier with the court date coming up, right? And the justified self-pity that I had that I couldn't see. And so Bill had called me that night and how are you? And I started talking, and I don't know what I sounded like, but and he was quiet for a while. I remember this, and I just was talking because he was quiet. So I kept talking, and then suddenly he's like, are you kidding me? And then he just starts going. And it's the one time in our friendship that he's actually like raised his voice and been abrupt like that. And basically he just said, like, good luck if you're going to be in fear and self-pity. And I knew I was in fear. I knew I had a lot of fear around the outcome of the court date. And what if I couldn't bring my son to Calgary? And what if this and what if that? And all these things were playing out. But I couldn't see the self-pity. And once he said that, and then he was saying some more things, but it was like a relief in like, okay, I know this is true. And I know that I need to just do what I need to do here, which is to not sit in the self-pity and the fear. And I have to actually believe what he's saying, which was, what if you're not supposed to have your kid? And my ego reacted. So like, I got angry initially, like I was just angry on the inside, listening to him carry on. But I remember being like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't God want me to have my kid? I'm the mom and he's the son, and da, 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 da. but I knew what he was saying was right, is what if that's not the plan? What if the plan is that something else, like that I can't even see, because I'm just one person on this planet and I don't have the viewpoint of God, and I don't see how things ripple effect. And what if it has nothing to do with me? What if my son needs to be with his dad for some reason that I'm not going to be able to connect the dots from until 20 years from now? Like, who knows? And that I don't know what not only I don't know what I need, I don't know what path God has for my son, for my son's dad, for my son's like I don't know. I just know that I have to admit that I don't know. But not only that, I need to lose the attitude around why would God take that from me, and have to believe that God has something better for me. And that, I think that this is what I need to make me happy, and this is what I think that my son needs to have a good life, and this is what, but I can't see, and my fears make everything so convoluted. And if I could just believe that I can let go and trust that God actually has better things for me than I could possibly imagine, and certain things might need to fall away, and certain things. So I tell you, I spent the next 3 days, that was on a Saturday, and I had court on Tuesday, and I spent the next 3 days like I like pray crying and pray crying, and then cleaning and getting up and then pray crying. And when I say pray crying, I mean like on my knees, just crying and just saying, God, take this fear from me, and let me trust that whatever you have in store for me, if I go to court on Tuesday and I'm not able to take Mace, that I can stand in that and believe that I'm trusting that I moved for a reason, and I feel that, and I can believe that something bigger is going to play out, and that moment is only a page out of a chapter out of a whole book, and I can't see the ending. And just help me to believe that. And by the time I got to court, like when I say God was all I had and God was all I used, I mean that in there. And it took a surrender of like through all of that. I don't know when the surrender was, but I can say that by the time I drove to court, I left early that morning because court was at 9 and the sun was coming up, and I felt so at peace, and I was prepared for any type of outcome. And the outcome was what I wanted, like we share my son, but I was prepared for it to not go that way, and I was prepared to give thanks no matter what the outcome was that day. And it was a huge emotional turmoil before the surrender, just like it says, and just like Bill had told me, like that before every surrender there's that emotional turmoil. And I kind of equate it to like the Wicked Witch of the West, where you're pouring water on her. It's like, it's like the ego trying to, fight back and to tell you it's not okay, but it's melting. And it's like, and then there's the surrender. And I had peace of mind as the sun came up, and I was grateful. And my prayer was really just like going into court. It was like, God, thank you for whatever outcome it is. I can't see the future, but thank you.
So we just finished off at page 65, step 6 in the 12 and 12. We're talking about the instincts. And now we're going to go to the beginning of step 4 in the 12 and 12. And what we're going to do as part of step 6 is we are going to read the step 4 in its entirety over the next couple sessions. And why do we do this? Because the step 4 in the 12 and 12 has a really good way of like highlighting more subtle defective character that we can all relate to at different aspects of life, and especially in relationships. Okay, so this is where we're going to start. Daniel is asking about pillars. Pillars are people that are 12-step. They're centered in God, that you talk about your life with, and they give you guidance and advice and help you navigate decisions based in self and trying to redirect you in the right path away from self. Okay, so step 6, step 4. So we talked about the instincts, and now we're going to get right into the instincts. There's 4 of them. There's 4 instincts, and they're the main ones that every human being has. So creation gave us instincts for a purpose. For without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. So if there were no social instinct, if men cared nothing for society of one another, there would be no society. So these desires, here they are: for sex relation, material and emotional security, and companionship. You should underline those four. Are perfectly necessary and right and surely God-given. Those are the instincts in that circle that I was talking about, okay? The four instincts: sex relation, material, emotional security, and companionship. And they're God-given, so they're natural for us. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper functions. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, they drive us, they dominate us, and they insist upon ruling our lives. So our desires for sex, material, and emotional security, and for an important place in society, often tyrannize us. Thus, when out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble, practically all the trouble there is. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. When that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. So let's talk about these instincts for a second. So way back in step 3, there's a line there that said, so we think our problems arise out of ourselves. So our problems that arise out of ourselves are based in the instincts. And when you think of arising out of yourself, it's way deep down inside. And then they come out in these actions of defective character that are based in selfish and self-centered behaviors, thoughts, and ideas. So, but this is actually what's running the show. This is all based in the subconscious. A lot of these instincts use coping mechanisms to try to get what it wants, what it thinks it needs. That's why we're like grasping at relationships. We're grasping at money. We're grasping at, trying to look good in society, whether it's a status within our peer group of men and women, looking fancy, dressing fancy, acting smart, at work, wherever it is. We're always trying to grasp and fill these instincts that are, for a lot of us alcoholics, there's a lot of brokenness in us.
I want to explain it the way you explained it to me that one time.
Okay.
The first time Bill explained this to me, again, I was freaking out over something. I remember I was in a hotel and I was trying to get to Calgary, and he told me this, and he told me in such a way, and I was drawing it as he was writing it. And this is where the tree thing that I talk about comes. But he was saying these instincts, right? So we all have the desire to belong, because if we didn't, cavemen would, somebody would stroll off and they would die. You had to stay as part of the group. And we have a desire to love, because we need to enjoy our relationships so that we want to stay in them, so that we don't wander off and die. And we want to reproduce, and we want to, have our emotions not be all over the place. So that again goes to the connection and the belonging. And so all these things, they're God-given in order to keep us in check, right? We don't want to stroll from the group and die, and we don't want to starve to death and be out in the cold. So all the things that we instinctually do are God-given to protect us and to keep us in line with each other. And so the way that Bill had explained it that night was that he's like, when you're born from the source, you're whole. And so you have these instincts, and you're not grabbing in excess, and you're not grabbing out of fear for losing something you have. You're just whole from the source, and you're doing your thing in the proper way. But then life breaks you through your significant life experiences. You witness domestic violence, or you have an abusive relationship, or your parents are alcoholics, or a parent goes to prison, or just all the things that, the traumas and the traumas that he talks about, where society breaks you in its own ways with its conditioning and the norms that are not normal for the spirit. And so as you get broken, these breaks, right, the defects, the defectiveness cause the defects of character, because the book says we're grabbing in excess for the things that we think we need, or we don't want to lose what we already have because we believe that we need it, and we believe we need these things, or we go after these things because we think we need them, emotional security and material security, so that we can be, you know, in a house and this and that. But a lot of that also goes down to how we look, right? So that we do belong, and that we have emotional security, and that we can attract a partner and keep a partner and all of that stuff. So it's more than just having a house over your head. But anyways, so these instincts, they're in excess because the ways that we've been broken. So the defects arise out of us, and they cause our failure because we're grabbing at things in a way that is not normal, and it's not God-given. We're taking it way too extreme. And like you said, we're doing that because of the experiences that we've had, and the coping mechanisms, and the defense mechanisms. So like a defective character for me that I talk about is avoidance. And so I'm not grabbing at things, but I have taken something to the excess out of fear of losing what I have, which is emotional security. So I believe that if I do a certain thing, I'm going to bring people in my life that are going to, you know, I'm going to lose the control of what I think I have, right? But it not relying on people and avoiding things, I came to a place of surrender, just like the alcohol. But that came from brokenness of my life experiences and watching, you know, my dad have relationships and fear and all these things, right? So when he explained that to me, it made so much sense. Just that, you know, we're born with our proper instincts in check, and we don't have any fear around that. And then over time, life breaks us, and we overcompensate, and we do things to the excess, trying to keep what we have, or not lose what we, or to not lose what we have, or we think we need, and we're grabbing at it frantically to bring ourselves security in whatever way it is. And so he said, this is the part that I first heard him. When I first ever heard him talk, this was the part that I heard. It was a step 6 meeting, and I was on the step 6 search. And he was saying, you know, when we don't act in defect or in self, and we do whatever it is. So like for me, the example I always give is that I don't text my ex when I'm bored or lonely. And when I didn't act in that defect, I didn't scrape the scab, so it could heal. And every time I don't act in defect, God gives a piece of me back, a little tiny piece back. And over time, I'm restored back to the person that I should have been before life broke me, and before the defects got in the way of my success and becoming the person that God wanted me to be all along. And he said in that meeting, that he said, you know, and God wanted us to be our authentic self, and to sin is to miss the mark. And it took us off the path of who we were designed to be. And my grandma always used to say that, and he sounded like my grandma that night. And yeah, so it all made sense. And so this whole thing is like so divinely inspired. It's crazy. Like Sigmund Freud is through this book, but the ego and the drives actually come from, or did I say Carl Jung? Sigmund Freud was the other psychologist that was so monumental in creating this book. And that's where the concept comes from, of the ego and the drives and the instincts. That was all his work. That still holds true today. And this fits over top of Christianity, and it fits over top of Buddhism. Nobody ever argues, and the book comes together just as it sold me, because so many different things come together and it all made sense. And so anyways, the big thing here is that in doing this, we become restored from our defectiveness, and we become closer to who God wanted us to be, and our authenticity is able to come through.
Okay. So, second paragraph, page 42. So powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, these instincts, they drive us, they dominate us, they insist upon ruling our lives. So what does that look like in live action? Well, the step 4, we'll get into that, and it'll really describe some things, but think about like powerfully. These instincts like actually are the driver of our whole lives. They're powerful. They push everything, right? So I'm always trying to grab at something, and I don't really have the power. Like you hear people say in meetings like, you know, I'm powerless over people, places, and things. The only thing I have control over is me. No, I don't. I couldn't control my anger. I couldn't control my lust. I couldn't control my judgment of other people. I didn't have any control over almost anything. So I was being driven by that unseen compelling force that pushed me powerfully to act out in these thoughts, ideas, and emotions that I had no power over. blindly, many times subtly. So I'm going to use an example here. So imagine you're in a meeting and you're sitting there talking with your girlfriends and you guys are all just kind of having a good like lady chat, or the guys are kind of having a good guy chat, and a man or a woman that's really hot walks in the room, and then now everyone changes, right? So I'll use guys, for example. We're all sitting there chit-chatting, and then this chick walks into the room, and now everyone just like shuts up. And now one of the guys, you notice he's pulling his arm up so he can show his watch off, right? The other guy's like getting up to walk by her and kind of flexing his muscles, and these things are driving these men powerfully, blindly, and subtly. And then the next thing you know, he's over there pouring coffee. A guy who never pours coffee at the meeting, suddenly pouring coffee to this chick that he likes, right? So we're going to do things like beyond what we would normally do, and react in ways that we're not actually in control over, right? Women do this all the time in their own way, right? So powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, these things just kind of come up and then we're acting in. They drive us, they dominate us. What kind of things dominate us? Well, women are like this and men are like this. I've used this example before. From the moment some men and women wake up, their whole life, it revolves around how they look to the opposite sex. Okay, I can't go out looking like this. I need to wear this shirt. And like all of the things in their thoughts are like, how am I going to look to this opposite sex? Where am I going to work? How am I going to work? Like everything has to do with like the opposite sex. From the car that they drive, the shoes that they wear, the watch that they buy, where they live. Oh, I can't live in that neighborhood. And part of it isn't just the opposite sex, it's society in general. And like we have a disease of actually validation. We want to be wanted and seen in a certain way so bad that we're driven powerfully, blindly, and subtly by so many of these things. And we really want that love, which is why a lot of women and men, they go and they cling to relationships powerlessly because they're looking for that emotional connection that they don't have with themselves. And they keep trying to get it through something external to them, another human being. And all they're really getting out of it is a sense of relief, of power and control. And once the relationship runs its course, which is usually 6 months to a year, because the shine wears off, even if it lasts that long, then they're still them. They're still themselves, and they haven't done any work. So of course, nothing outside of you is going to fix you, right? Powerfully, blindly, subtly, these things drive us, dominate us, and they insist upon ruling our lives. That's also the pursuit of money. Okay.
That can also be like I think of a sponsee who just would not share in a meeting because she didn't want people to judge her sharing.
Yeah.
And so
it's
like
the validation.
and it can look like you're what's the word I'm looking for?
Pride in reverse.
No, I'm repelling. I don't know the word, but
retracting.
Yeah, that's the word. That was the retracting.
So yeah, and those defects can look like they got many different faces, right? That's why I always say the alcoholic is incapable of honesty on their own. They can rationalize and justify the most errant nonsense in their life to suit their actions or their inaction. Mm-hmm. And in that case, it's the inaction, right? And she's going to give you a plausible excuse that makes some sense to her sometimes. But in the light of the havoc that this anxiety and self-dependence has, she really doesn't know why she does it. Right, just like it says in the book about the drink, right? So and that often tyrannizes us. That's really important. Okay, when we act in these defects long enough, they tyrannize us. And we used to get relief out of various different defects. You might be a gambler, maybe you're angry, maybe you're a sex addict, maybe you're a relationship hopper, maybe you're all of these things. At some point, you'll get to the point where you get to the end of the road on all of them. Mm-hmm. And then you don't get relief out of nothing. And the restless, irritable, discontented is so fucking strong that you're either picking up a drink again or you're putting a gun in your mouth because you can't handle yourself. That's what alcohol has always done. It's allowed us to have something between us and looking at ourselves.
But really, in all of these pursuits of all of these things, really, we're actually searching for God. In all of these relationships, we're looking for that love that we get from somebody else that we can get from God. When I drank the spirits or smoked the dope, I get that feeling where I feel like I'm super connected to something greater than myself, but it wears off because it's not legitimate. It's not real. That's a longing for God in my life. I just don't know it.
They use that analogy with the codependent relationships where half of people can't make a whole relationship. And they told us that in treatment, that's a treatment center thing. And it's like that. It's like two people who are not whole themselves, that the wholeness has to come from God. God has to restore us to a whole person. And until that happens, we're not okay with I wasn't okay with women, and I wasn't going to be okay in a relationship. And it's I would say it's a work in progress, but I think as long as you're seeking and you're willing to have new experiences, like for me, I'm scared of getting into relationships, but I know that I can't stay in that because I think that that's a defect going in the other way. So it's like I have to face there's certain things in my recovery that I'm not going to even be able to access until I actually step out of the box and be willing to be vulnerable. And so it looks a whole bunch of different ways, but it's a process that is futile if you don't have a higher power to be able to actually do the healing for you.
100%. So thus, when out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble, practically all the trouble there is. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. And you can see those troubles in all of society. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. They're all suffering from the instincts, not just us alcoholics, all people. You can see it everywhere. But we take it to another level because we have this ego and this need for more. Never is there enough what we thought we wanted. We're always looking for more pleasures that are possible or even due to us, right? Then it goes on to say, nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that to be true, right? I've sponsored a lot of fucking people in this program. And almost every case of emotional turmoil or suffering or, depression, anxiety, or whatever the emotional disturbance is, it's a case of misdirected instinct based in a set of belief systems. When that happens, our great natural assets, these instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. So what happens is, as we crave and we try to grab for more of the pleasures that are possible or due to us, we create an emotional, mental turmoil, which actually turns into physical sickness as well, which is why we need so much spiritual guidance. And when you think of the word spiritual, ritual, the word ritual means doing something over and over and over. So this is a spiritual, which is why the processes in the literature that we talk about, the directions, they're actually rituals that we do over and over and over, and then we get the spiritual out of it. And then we become, when the spiritual malady is overcome, so we overcome the malady, the sickness, the deep sickness, and then we straighten out mentally. Because we're straightening out mentally, we straighten out physically. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. That brokenness going through life, that fractures, as we work the program, we kind of come back into alignment, we become whole, and then we're balanced out again. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, with what I've seen, is to work with God and to be willing to allow him to help us. So moving on. So step 4 and step 6 is a vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. We want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. We wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move towards their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us found that the faith which works in daily living is still out of reach. So we're going to end there, but first we're going to talk about it. So step 4 is a vigorous, meaning like we really go at this shit, and painstaking. It's telling me it is going to be painful. There is going to be some pain involved in this process. Effort to discover. I need to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. What are they in me today? And what have they been in the past? I'm looking for these emotional liabilities in a vigorous and painstaking effort. And hopefully, as I'm looking, I don't get discouraged and I fucking get scared of the pain and I get sick of the pain and I run and bail. Because when I run and bail, because I'm not in charge of these subconscious patterns of the instincts, they fucking still run my life. So the reality is I can't bail. I have to fucking go down this path that's less traveled. Because I can't go back to the way that I used to be. I don't want that. And the only way to not get that is I got to try something different, which is why this becomes a deep internal commitment. It's a persistent, consistent commitment to change and to trust God and trust the people around me and work forward in the most positive attitude that I can. The next paragraph, 43, we want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires warped us. What is it saying? Well, I need to find out exactly, precisely how, when, and where. How did it happen? When did it happen? Where in my life did this happen? This natural desire, where did it get warped? Was it when I was in grade 3 and I found the first porno magazine under my uncle's bed? And then when I was in grade 5, I found my dad left the porn on the computer. And then I started treating women like possessions. And then at 40-some years old, I think women are my gift to fucking me and that they should cater to me and they're actually a piece of meat for my usage. And because society has a certain viewpoint on women and a lot of women actually live up to that viewpoint, I have this idea of what I think a woman is. And that is a natural desire that has warped me. Not only did it warp me in my sexual conduct, it warps me in my emotional connection to them because I think they're a possession of mine. So I never really emotionally attached to another human being because I've always put them as an object or whatever it might be, okay? There's many examples of different ways that we can talk about this. And then it says we wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. So it says I need to look squarely at the unhappiness that I've caused other people and myself in whatever the behavior might be, whatever the area of instincts that I have caused other people pain and myself by wanting something so bad or by treating something so bad or whatever it is. I got to look at and take data on my life, inventory, and look at my life. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, so I can discover what they are if I look for them. The problem with looking for them is I got a lot of pride built in me, and I don't really want to admit certain things about myself, because as soon as I admit something about myself that I don't like, now I'm humiliated and my pride really takes offense to that. And I've spent my whole life being prideful, not wanting to admit those things. Why? Because nobody else fucking admits those things. You know, in my group of guys, when I grew up, if I admitted that I cried with my wife as we talked, I'd be fucking laughed at, right? So I would never admit that to a group of guys like that. Why? Because it would be humiliating. Now at 40-some years old, I go and I have a sponsor and I admit that I did that. Yeah, it hurts me a lot, but it only hurts my ego. Because really the reality of admission in that is that humiliation and humbled through the pain, but he accepts me because he's actually on a different basis of life. He's on a higher level of consciousness and he can understand me and gives me the validation that I can actually talk to him about these things. But whatever it might be, right? I'm going to use another example. Maybe I'm really not a good man to women. And to admit that to this guy when I've hid it my whole life, the only people who know that I'm not nice to my women are the women I've been with. And they've never said anything because of their own defective character. And so for me to say, yeah, I've fucking done this and I've done that, and I'm not very fucking proud of that. There's a lot of humiliation in that. And then so growing through that, I'm humbled by a lot of pain as I work through that as well. So what am I doing? I'm learning through the humility, the lower levels of humility. Why? In the desire, because I want to fucking be a better person. I want to grow in the image and likeness of God. So I got to go through those tough patches. The thing about going through these tough patches is there's no guarantee that I'm actually going to get what I think it is on the other side. There's no guarantee. So that's a scary adventure. Janine talks about going in the unknown. I'm going in the unknown with no fucking guarantee of anything. My whole life's been based on guarantees. I give you this, I get that. I do this work, I get this paycheck. Like my whole life's been based on almost guarantees of I'm going to get something. But now I got to do things where I'm not guaranteed anything. I'm guaranteed a promise that I'm going to build character. What the fuck is that even? Like it's fucking nonsensical. It makes no fucking sense. Well, common sense will thus become uncommon sense. The way that I thought life is and how I live, it's actually the exact opposite. But I don't know that until I try that. And the payoff isn't here right now. It's way down the road, but I don't know what it looks like. And that's really scary. So before I let Janine finish off, by discovering our emotional deformity disorder, we can move towards their correction. And that's a tedious process, moving towards their correction. That's what step 6 is about, moving towards correction, growing in the image and likeness of our Creator, having that vision of who I actually want to be. And inside, I know I can be that guy. When I did my first step 4, I knew I was a good man inside. I've always known that. But my actions and my behaviors and what I put on paper and how I've lived my life, it was contrary to that. But once I did my step 4 and 5, I knew I could change. I knew there was hope for me. I just didn't know, like Janine said, how good it actually could get. And it's gotten really good to the point where I don't even have words for it. And without a willing and persistent effort to do this, willing and persistent effort, action to do this, there will be little sobriety because I drink over these defects. And kind of I'll align it like this. You have a heart. You have God inside you. God is based in love. It's your GPS. Love is your GPS. It's God's pointer system. And it's always been there to guide you. The only problem is society and the journey of life is broken and piled up a bunch of broken shit on top of the God in you. So you make decisions that aren't conducive to your fucking spirit. But when you go against that spirit within you, you don't really notice, but you're going against yourself. And when you go against yourself in your subconscious, you create shame. Shame is dishonoring one's own consciousness. Even though you can validate it in your society with the people you live around and what society's doing, you can validate all your actions and how you are because everyone else is doing it. You can't justify it to the God inside you because you know it's wrong when you peel back the layers. So by peeling back these layers, you can actually get in touch with the guidance system, and that's where you actually are. You're based in love. You're a human being fucking designed with love and wired by society for fucking selfishness. And we undo the wiring. And when you're walking this new trail, you got to walk a new trail and build a new path because that old trail keeps getting you in the rut. And think of a trail that has a rut, you're always in the rut. It's hard to get out of a rut. So you fucking carve a new trail and build your own path with God. Or contentment forest. Well, it's searching and fearless moral inventory, moment to moment. Most of us found that the faith that really works in daily living is still out of reach. That's all I got.
I remember I worked with a man in my job, and there was obviously things in his past that had led him to therapy, but he was telling me that he didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted to talk about the way forward and how to figure things out to feel better without having to dissect the past. And so we spent some time there, and I was really wanting to understand the fear that he had. And he said that he hadn't cried in years. And anyways, so by the end of the session we had gotten to it, and it was an emotional session. It probably will always be one of the ones I remember vividly. And he started to cry, and he said he was sobbing, and he's like, I was so scared to cry because I don't think I'm going to ever stop. And the grief that he felt, he said, I just feel like when it comes, it's going to swallow me up. So I pushed it back in a lot of different ways that have caused me a lot of different types of pain. So as he was crying there, and I just was letting him cry, and eventually the crying stopped, and we were able to talk about that the emotions of the experience in the past, that they're never going to swallow you up. And people, that paragraph, to me, I think of that guy when I read it, because it's really saying, like, if we don't take a look not only at our defects, but where did we get them, where were we warped. And a lot of that, like we talked about tonight, is in childhood and things that happen through life events. And like my dad and his marriages and the things that happened in that, and how that created a fear of relationships, and more specifically of depending on anybody, and how that has impacted my life. And eventually it seemed like it was working until it wasn't, and I saw that wasn't the way to live. And if I don't look at those things, I don't get a full picture, and you can't solve a problem till you recognize it's a problem and you understand the problem. And so that paragraph to me tells me, the hope in that is that we explore the past, and we're able to see exactly where we were warped, and how we're getting emotionally disturbed, and how we're harming people. And as a result of that, we're able to move past it. And we can't move past it if we don't bring it to an awareness, which is what these steps are doing for us. And so I'll close with just like that paragraph, and how I was talking about Bill, and he was giving me hope. But this book gives hope all through it. It tells you, if you do this, you'll get that. If you do this, you'll get that. And I'm convinced today that when I realized that this counselor, she really did nothing but the steps, and she got these results. And I thought, okay, I think that can happen for me too. And all I used was the book. So my message today, some people think it's controversial, is if you don't have a really colorful sobriety that's worthwhile, then you're doing something wrong. And your answer isn't in a sponsor or pillar even. They got to be directing you back to the book, because that's where the answer is. And there's hope through it, that if you do this, you get that. So you got to figure out what you're not doing, where you missed something, and do that, and then you get that. And so I used to think that these steps wouldn't work for me, but I was just missing some things, and I needed some help from somebody who had figured it out before me. So if that's where you're at, I think you're in the right spot. And thank you for everybody who attended tonight. And we will close with that.